Moving on, the next set of issues I want to discuss are some things that I'm not going to discuss. These are things that people often bring up when the topic of animal research comes up, but they're really not relevant to the question or the ethical question about whether experimentation is wrong or not wrong, or when it's wrong and when it's not wrong, or anything like that. These are observations based on my discussing these issues with people for a few decades. First, with some people, when the issue comes up, they raise complaints about what activists do, what those animal rights people do or think or whatever. And I want to just observe that what any sort of activist of any type ever does is just not relevant to the morality of any kind of action. So, for example, suppose we're thinking about whether abortion is wrong or not wrong, and somebody brings up what some activists or advocates do about the topic of abortion. Suppose there's some pro-choice people who are really nice. Does that mean abortion's okay? No. Suppose there's some pro-life people who are really nice. Does that mean abortion's wrong? Suppose some pro-choice people are kind of mean or rude or nasty. Does that make abortion okay or wrong? No, there's just no connection with any kind of activist behavior and the action. So if anybody says anything about activists, that might be interesting to think about, but it's just not relevant to the question of, is doing this wrong or not wrong? And that's really just true of anything. The second issue is people see this topic, or people often see the issue in terms of animal rights. And I don't think there's a problem seeing the issue in terms of animal rights. But it's worthwhile to notice that this term can mean kind of different things, and maybe we don't really have to use it. So my sense is that sometimes there's a lot of confusion that results from the words animal rights or the phrase animal rights, and we might want to just avoid it if we can. And we can. So this kind of relates to the what do you mean question. So first thing to notice is whenever you're talking about rights, you are talking about either legal rights or moral rights. Moral rights are sometimes called natural rights, and people sometimes don't distinguish those. The next thing is there's all sorts of different rights. So there's the right to life, there's the right to your body, there's the right to autonomy, there's all sorts of different rights, and you always have to be specific about what kind of right you're talking about. People sometimes think if they hear the phrase animal rights, oh, what are you talking about? The right to vote, the right to drive? No. That's not the right anybody's talking about. Usually people are talking about, the right to your life, the right to your body. Yeah, those sorts of rights. The right to being able to move around freely. So we always need to be careful about what exact rights we're talking about. Next, I want to observe that people sometimes seem to think that if animals don't have rights, that would mean that animal experimentation is permissible, that it's not wrong. So, animals don't have any rights, animal experimentation is okay. That is not true. Why is that? If animals have rights, then probably animal experimentation would be wrong. But animal experimentation could be wrong for other reasons than their having rights. So it's not like animals having rights really settles the issue. People sometimes think it does, but it really doesn't, because animal experimentation could be wrong even if animals don't have rights. There could be other reasons why it's wrong, other moral reasons why it's wrong. Next potential distraction. People often respond to the issue, animals aren't equal to humans, or animals aren't very important, or they're not as important as humans. A good question about when people say this is to ask, what do you mean? What is equality? What does equal really mean? What does important really mean? These are words that are hard to define. And it's interesting to see what people have to say. They might offer some definitions that make sense. They might offer definitions that don't make sense. But these are words that are hard to define. They might be merely saying these things to just assume that animal research is permissible. They might be kind of begging the question, so to speak. But suppose we have some idea what people mean when they say this. We can, of course, ask, why think that? Why exactly is that true? We might agree that animals and humans aren't equal or equally important in some sense, but it's still worthwhile to ask, why is this? Sometimes we believe things just on the basis of tradition. Everybody thinks this. Sometimes we believe things on the basis of prejudice, sometimes on the basis of self-interest, but sometimes we believe things that just aren't really true. But let me just observe, kind of like a previous premise, suppose we agree that animals aren't equal and aren't as important. some people think, well, that just means that animal experimentation is okay. If they're not equal to us, if they're not as important as us, then experimentation is fine. Well, that seems to be false. Many philosophers have argued that even if animals aren't equal, and even if animals aren't as important as us, they still have value and importance that would make animal experimentation wrong. So these, what people often say about equality and importance often doesn't really lead where they think it leads. Again, so our big question is, all right, which animal research is morally permissible, which is obligatory, and which is wrong, if any, and why? And you can discuss this in terms of rights, equality, importance, but you don't have to.